All right, good morning, directors. We're just a little bit after 9:30, so I think we'll get ourselves started today. And as always, we begin by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service Area includes Coast Salish, Kwakwaka'wakw, and Nuu-chah-nulth territories. And I'm just going to see who's online. We have Director Deck, Director Lanyon, Director Wally, Director Rice, and Director Vanesh. Did I miss anyone? And Director Arbor, sorry. And Director Kerr. Okay, there you go, two more. Quite a long list of folks online. So we'll begin today by a call to order and a motion to approve the agenda.
An amendment to the agenda to move item 6 to after item 1, being a big and heavy item instead of leaving it till later on.
Does anyone want to second that? Okay, thank you very much, Director Chapman. Do you care to say anything, Director Senate, on that? Sorry.
Thank you. It was because it's a pretty substantive item and I just want to have it done earlier than being tired when we get to it potentially.
Fair. That makes great sense to me. So any further discussion on anyone opposed to that variation of the agenda? Okay, and that carries. So we'll move then to item 6. I may give staff a second then we have to adjust any slideshows or anything, or are we ready to go with item 6? Oh, I'm sorry, Director Senate, that was 1 and then 6. That was the motion. Sorry, I always have to wait a second till I turn it on.
Correct. It was after item 1. I thought item 1 was going to be perfunctory.
Okay. All right. So the first item then would be minutes for receipt from the advisory committee, January 16th. Perfect. Moved and seconded. Anyone opposed to receipt? That carries. And now we'll move to item 6. And I will pass that over then to our CAO to begin the presentation. Thank you. Can someone second that? Thank you, Director Grieve.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. Good morning to the board. And today we have Kelly Broughton, our Manager of Financial Planning, and Vivian Shaw, our Manager of CSW, Senior Manager of CSW and Services, who will be introducing the recommended financial plan for the Service 391, the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service. And so, sorry, Vivian, I can't see if your microphone is on or if who will introduce this report to begin with. Is Kelly introducing, or Vivian, you've got it off the top?
We'll go straight into the presentation.
Sorry, so Vivian, you'll be leading off. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you through the CEO to the chair and the CSW board. Good morning. The presentation that is uploaded here will walk you through the highlights of the key changes of the 2025 to 2029 presentation of the financial plan. And these adjustments here that we've made in consistent with the board direction that we received back in November, as well as the updated revenue and the cost projections.
Vivian, could you move the microphone just up and a little closer to your mouth? Just a little soft.
Is this better?
That's clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so diving right into it, we looked at, again, consistent with the board direction that we received back in November, we strategically looked at the tipping fees so that we can target the higher volume waste streams to ensure that we have that balanced budget for the 2025-2029 financial plan while minimizing the impact on our curbside partners, specifically those that have the residential curbside program. Before we get into it, I just wanted to go into a bit more detail around the material IDs so that I would just recognize that it's not entirely intuitive. The acronym that we keep using here around the table, the MSW, stands for Municipal Solid Waste. But I just wanted to clarify that it refers to the residual waste that's going into the landfill, and the originating sources comes from household, businesses, institutions, construction and demolition sectors. So it's not specific to waste sources originating from our municipal curbside partners through the municipal curbside programs. It's just a term that we use. So one of the core considerations for the fee adjustments for 2025 was in recognition that municipal budgets would be heavily impacted by any rate increases at this point, specifically for their curbside collection programs. As again, recognizing the municipalities already navigating through their financial budgets and planning for the next fiscal year. So introducing a tipping fee increase at this point would cause significant strain, and it would be hard for them to absorb those costs at this time. So given this, we consciously chose not to pursue any adjustments in that waste category and more or less focus on, for the municipal curbside rates for this year. And we commit to working with the municipalities for the 2026 and onwards, as we've done in prior years. So while we've made the decision to hold the curbside rates, staff focused instead on increasing looking at the rates for the construction and demolition sector, consistent with the board direction from November. So this is a significant revenue generator, and it doesn't impact the municipal budget in that same way. So when you take a look at the other waste categories, so this is the construction and demolition waste, which is right up at the top. These are the folks that are generally clearly identifiable construction and demolition waste contractors disposing of that material waste stream. And then second to that is the MSW, ICNI, and household category. Again, that's not easily widely intuitive. So just to explain what is captured under this, this is the commercial, the institutional, and industrial waste, but it also is inclusive of the self-haul folks and the subscription service. So households that don't have curbside service and that haul their waste directly to the landfill or through private subscription service through private contractors. So we focused on those, and again, reflecting the board's direction to shifting more of that funding of waste management from taxation to align with the user pay model. So what we've looked at, and we'll go into a bit more detail in the next couple of slides around breaking down each of those categories. But yeah, when we looked at the categories, we looked at the highest impact to tipping fees and those with the highest volume categories. So the ones that are generating like roughly about 96% of our revenue include the construction demolition waste category, drywall, clean wood waste, municipal ICNI, and household, yard waste, organics, and municipal by contract, or sorry, MSW municipal by contract. So we'll dive a bit more into the details on the next slide, but from what you can see here on the slide, the key changes to the tipping fees is in the construction waste category, which is an increase of $50 per ton, going from $155 to $205 per ton. And in the ICNI household municipal waste category, that's an increase of $10 per ton from $155 to $165 per ton. And then there is a slight increase in the drywall and the clean fill. And again, these are incremental increases to align with that construction waste rationale. And pending the board decision today, the plan will be to implement the new tipping fees with the public communication campaign for implementation on April 1st. This next slide here, again, goes into a bit more detail by breaking down the waste categories by waste volumes, just to really illustrate the impact of the various categories. So as you can see, the municipal, the very first category, the municipal ICNI and household waste category is the largest contributor to landfill waste with 31,800 tons. So again, representing that the most significant financial and volumetric impact. The second highest category is the construction waste at 11,855 tons. And so when you break it down within this next slide, you'll be able to see it overlaid with the revenue generated from each of the various waste categories. So again, with the highest waste category, it's the municipal solid waste with the IC&I and household. The cost impact is 5.3 million. Construction and demolition waste will come out to about 2.3 million. And then the other ones are significantly lower in relative to the two categories that we've focused on. Then I'm going to move this, turn this over to Kelly to go into the proposed changes, or sorry, the recommended changes.
Thank you, Vivian. We're just going to start with a quick reconciliation between the proposed budget to the recommended. So on the operating side, the proposed budget initially included a $1 million increase to taxation, which was not aligned with the board's preference of an alternative that placed weighting more onto the user pay model. Following board feedback, we've reduced the requisition by $500,000. Through additional analysis, staff have adjusted some of the tipping fee categories to generate an additional $774,968 in 2025. During our review, we identified and corrected an error for one category. It was discovered that tonnage for some construction waste had been counted twice as it was coming into the scale and going out of the scale. This has led to a decrease of $252,343 from the proposed revenue calculations. This correction drops the net 2025 increase to tipping fee revenue to $522,625. The recommended tipping fee category adjustments align revenue sources to the historical ratios of 30% to 70% taxation to tipping fee, and are planned to start increasing as of April 1st, 2025. The 2026 to 29 financial plan also includes gradual increases to both tipping fees and the requisition in future years. For the purposes of this budget and to ensure we did not negatively impact the member municipality utility rates, the 2025 budget focuses on increasing the tipping fees to the construction waste and the IC&I household MSW categories, which are from grocery stores, multifamily, etc. While tipping fee increases to all categories are set to gradually start increasing in 2026. The new contract for the Campbell River site operations was finalized along with the transportation agreement. And combined, the two contracts have increased the operational budget by approximately $500,000 per year for the years 2026 to 2029. And 2025 sees the largest increase of just over $770,000. The surplus was estimated to be at $1.4 million. Of that, $577,000 has been allocated to in-progress operational projects that were started but not completed in 2024. A further $322,694 has been used to balance the 2025 budget, and the remainder, $503,000, has been included as a contribution to the Capital Works Reserve. Capital budget changes. The capital budget has increased by $3.6 million from the proposed budget. The increase is driven by 2024 carry forwards of projects not just completed of just over $2.5 million, and the addition of two new capital projects, $245,000 for a membrane filtration that was previously planned for 2026 and has been moved into 2025. There's been $875,000 added for a new shredder. This is to help alleviate the pressure the shredder puts on the capital plan, to help alleviate the pressure the shredder puts on the capital plan. $450,000 that was originally included in 2025 for the purchase of a screener has been eliminated. Heading into the reserves, while the additional tipping fee analysis has been a good start, we know much work needs to be completed through the next 2 years. The solid waste management plan is going to bring new initiatives and diversion goals. The tipping fee categories need more refinement and more analysis around who should pay and how much needs to be completed. The updated asset management plan and capital program will fill in the gaps in the future years. As you can see, other than the cell 3 projects, 2029 through 2034 have big gaps in the capital plan. Although the tipping fee increases have generated additional revenue of $6,862,000 over the 5 years, it hasn't been enough to make up for the decreased requisition. And it has impacted the ending reserve balances, with the Capital Works Reserve taking the biggest hit. The Capital Works Reserve has a projected ending balance of just under $12 million in 2034, which is $5 million less than what was projected in the proposed budget. As staff bring future financial framework policies to the board for consideration, the risk to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service due to the low levels of reserves will be incorporated into those discussions. The requisition by apportionment. So this slide just details the apportionment by area. It's using the 2025 completed roll, and it results in a residential tax rate of 11 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. The next slide just shows the expected impact per property, per median residential property. The tax requisition is being held at 5.5 million for 2025 through 2027, increasing to 5.9 million by 2028. This is to help support the long-term asset management and the planned debt servicing needs. At 5.5 million, the impact to an average residential property varies from a high of $108,000, from $108 in the CVRD electoral area B and $94 in CVRD electoral area A, to the lows of $17 in the village of Savalas and $14.50 in the SRD electoral area A within the jurisdiction of 784. The planned increase of $400,000 in 2028 will add approximately 0.08 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, or if averaged across all areas, an annual increase of $4.70. The 2024 year end is underway, and once it has been finalized, the final 2024 quarter results will be brought back to the board for review. The results will be included in the planning for future cycles. During the proposed budget presentation, the board's discussion over the service funding model and consideration of revenue raised purely from tipping fees and utility rates instead of taxation was heard. Staff suggests the board revisit this throughout the coming year and in concert with the initiatives coming from the solid waste management plan update and the work the staff has laid out with the policy development and user fee and charges review. The solid waste management service is complex, and it comprises many areas of business in varying geographical locations, whether this includes the management of the landfills, waste management collection, depots, or multiple alternative ways in which the waste is managed within smaller communities. Methods to raise revenue vary for solid waste management operations, and it is not unusual to see some funding coming from traditional taxation and parcel taxes, as well as tipping fees. Considerable staff time is needed to conduct further research and analysis to determine full costing in the lines of the business. Impacts across many users and communities also need to be considered. During the proposed presentations, directors asked if the cost of capital had been measured and incorporated into future capital projects, and what impact diversionary tactics will have on the future build of Cell 3. While we know the basic answers, we can't give a complete and informed answer at this time. To build the solid financial foundation, a phased approach will be taken. Staff will draft policy, receive board feedback and direction, and then proceed to finalize governance documents. The establishment of key policies will provide comprehensive direction to staff for putting in place the mechanisms to run operations and to generate the funds necessary for sustainable service. This agile approach will inform the 2026 budget cycle and become solidified within the 2027 cycle and beyond. It is expected that the full completion will take approximately 2 years, as this will coincide with the establishment of the updated solid waste management plan. This brings us to the end of the presentation. The 2025 to 2029 Comox Strathcona Waste Management Recommended Financial Plan incorporates and addresses the board's comments and feedback provided at the November proposed budget presentation. As a result of that, staff are recommending the board approve option 1. Thank you for your time, and staff are available to answer your questions.
Thanks very much for the presentation. And I see a couple of lights coming on, and we'll go first to Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Coming from a career of 27 years in the building supply and hardware business, I have to point out that this increase set to take effect on April 1st will create extreme hardship for the many small contractors, carpenters and builders who are a big employer of young people in our jurisdictions. Construction waste going from 155 to 205. This will affect the builders who are already bid on these jobs, are already committed to them. It's a very tight market, and there's a lot of very, very small margins there that they're working with. You know, they're already very vulnerable to unpredictable increases in building supplies, interest rates, and now, for God's sake, tariffs. So I think, you know, at a time when we are trying to incentivize home building, you know, this along with our never-ending changes to building codes and added multiple new regulations and permitting, you know, we seem to be at odds to what our actual goal is. As I say, you know, these jobs are already underway. So I just can't see that we're that tone deaf to that sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Grieve. We'll go next to Director Arbor online and then back to the room.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess a slightly different view than Director Grieve. I think I've heard this board for the last 6 years. I've been on it, talk about moving to a pollution pay model, basically user pay model. And I'm glad that staff is doing that. And in fact, I was thinking, well, maybe we could have gone even a little more on it. I've been involved in a few demo projects, and I've taken truckloads to the dump. And every time I go, I actually thought to myself, it's pretty cheap for the volume I'm bringing, you know, today. And to be honest, I think it's in the scheme of a build, the deconstruction aspect. I think starting to increase the fee will really help signal that that's where this board is moving back towards user pay. And over time, if the fee becomes high enough, maybe we will end up with a DEMEX or something in the Comox Valley. Maybe we'll see more effort put into separating what is good material. Everyone that's in zero waste and all that, they, you know, the cheaper you make it to dump at the landfill, the more people will do it. And when you make it a little more expensive. So my question to staff is, have you thought about, well, I guess that was not the direction from the board, but I was hearing you about we're not covering the $5 million gap to where we need to be in the next few years. Are there opportunities to layer up that increase? So this year it's $50, but could we signal to the market that it might go an extra 10 or 15% a year, and what would be the financial impact? I don't know if it would get us there, but you know, at $200 a ton, I'm just wondering what would happen if we went to 250 or something like that. Maybe not this year, but if we land in that spot, and that's probably my main question. Yeah, I'll save my side question because there's probably other people that want to talk.
Sure, I can answer that. So for 2025 and 2026, we proposed the increase. And then starting in 2027, there's an additional increases added to that, 27, 28, and 29. There does reach a point that the solid waste staff have analyzed that there becomes a tipping point where it becomes, sorry. There comes a point where the risk to leakage becomes greater than the additional revenue that we would raise through increased tipping funds.
I think if I can just add one thing to Kelly's point there also is that Kelly mentioned the fiscal foundational work that is also needed, and then that analysis of policies and board direction around that policy formation. A lot of those policies are really important to be able to define what that long range tipping fee structure is and what it supports and how it incorporates the board's values. So Kelly's correct. The recommended budget does include those increases over the coming years. But I think to get more specifically to your point, Director Arbor, we would look to those financial policies to really underscore the direction of the board.
I just wanted to touch on Kelly's last point around the potential for leakage. Just doing a really quick jurisdictional scan as part of this analysis here. We are already above our neighboring jurisdictions. So the ACRD at 185, specifically for this waste category, construction and demolition. So ACRD is at 185, Mount Waddington is at 145, RDN's at 145 plus the waste hauler licensing, which actually brings it down to the 135 mark for those that have signed up for the waste hauler program. CRD is at 150. And yeah, we just have to be careful. We're not anticipating a whole lot moving off, just considering the high cost of transport to some of these other areas, and also recognizing that they don't accept out of region waste, but the industry could start to get creative, and that is a real possibility if we haphazardly increase without that full consideration of the other various policies that are coming forward.
Okay, thanks, Vivian. And Kelly, just for your next answer, could you bring the mic a little closer? Just they seem to be a little quiet these days. And going next, and that's Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thanks for mentioning the volume. Yeah, it does seem that the mics over the last little bit have gotten quite a bit quieter, so outside voices help as well. Yeah, really happy to see the tipping fees increasing and really, I think one of the things, and I think Director Arbor talked about, things being cheaper. And really that's for the end user, and it creates this blind spot where people don't realize that full cost that things are happening. And I think that's really one of the downsides of the taxation requisition side of this, is that it obviously the cost doesn't change, but it definitely, from a psychological perspective, may for those that are utilizing the service. I had one little question really just around mattresses. And the $20 fee that's being charged, and when that was introduced, it was to kind of cover the cost of deconstruction. But I don't see that it's ever changed. Like, it seems pretty stuck at $20. Just in my mind, it seems like that cost to us has probably gone up, and just wondering if that's something that's been contemplated. I know it's not a major item here, but just thought I'd get a sense of that.
Yeah, we're actually that's a great point. Mattresses is a pretty high dollar value in terms of processing. And through the purchase of the shredder pending board approval, we're looking to be able to do a bit more work in that space to be able to bring that down. But as you can appreciate, that comes with an added cost. It was with the anticipation that this was more of a temporary measure, with the anticipation of the extended producer responsibility program coming into play this year. But from what we have gathered from the ministry, that program has been delayed. So it is still the local government's responsibility to handle this material. Through this tipping fee bylaw increase, we really wanted just to isolate it to a few categories so that it's much more laser focused for the time being. It is, while it is a big item, it's, I think it's 160,000 on our proposed or our recommended budget here. The overall impact isn't nearly as great. So we wanted to, again, just focus on the few categories that is the most impactful for now. And then we can reevaluate once we have a broader understanding of what that shredding program could look like and do a full cost recovery on that waste stream. Again, also pending updates from the provincial program.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And I do see other solid waste services across the province charge for, you know, couches and other things that are kind of similar as well. But yeah, like I said, I know it's a small thing. And I guess just getting back to leakage or things meandering off into other jurisdictions, I think in the past I've probably mentioned a few times about our board, specifically the co-chairs, sort of meeting or discussing with other solid waste chairs on Vancouver Island, at least, to kind of get a sense. And as you said, we're going up, but maybe not some of the other ones. And just wondering if any of those discussions have happened, or if that's something that's useful, or even at the staff level.
We do have a fairly robust communication group, especially here on the island. We're a pretty tight-knit group here. I can assure you, all of the other municipalities are charging the $20 fee at this moment. I can't remember, I think it was back in either 2023 or 2024. We did increase it from $15 to $20 to reflect the ongoing costs to manage this material. So that's through to inclusive of the shredding, the transport, and the labor the labor component to manage this waste stream. And the next review will again incorporate that update. But for the time being, we are aligned with our jurisdiction, or sorry, the other jurisdictions around here.
Excellent. And I wasn't necessarily thinking just in terms of the mattresses, but tipping fees in general. Just if I heard correctly, some of the jurisdictions are a bit lower than we are at this point.
We do. We're again in constant communication just to make sure, just try and see where we can have those alignments and understanding those unintended consequences if we do end up differing substantially. So we have an understanding of where they're at for all their waste categories. C and D is definitely one that with this increase, we are quite a ways different, but yeah, so those are the ones that are here, right here on the island. There are some higher tipping fees, say for example, Cowichan, Cathette, but that they have different circumstances with their export and which is again at the whim of the dollar, potentially tariffs that they're still exploring right now. So it's a bit of a different circumstance. So which is part of the reason for their much higher elevated fee. But for those that have landfills similar to our operations, it is we're more or less aligned on the other fees.
So thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Vivian. I appreciate the answers there. And we'll go, there's no one online. We'll go next to Director McCollum.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report and these requested changes to how we are going to meet our operational and capital needs. I'm pretty happy with the suggested changes and where we landed with this. I don't think we can get away from increasing capital cost burden, but I do think it is important that we don't overly subsidize getting the cost of disposing of waste by using taxation, and we need to really stay focused on that. And I think this does a good job of getting us a bit more in line with that. Just one question I had, I think when we were talking about the capital cost for this year, there was a mention that we deferred the purchase of a screener. And I was just wondering if you could expand on what the impact to the service would be by not doing that purchase this year.
Thanks for the question. The screener is something that it is a critical piece of equipment for the management of contamination in our organics waste stream. But we have about a year and a half of full operation at the organics facility now. So as we gain more experience, what we've found is that we can actually rent the screener at a fraction of the cost. It's only last year was utilized for roughly about 9 weeks. So in reevaluating our capital plan and what we actually need on site for the shredder, we do have one on site, but one of the teeth sheared off, and it took a couple weeks in order for us to be able to get that material, and we ran it. It was we did have a bit of a bottleneck, so we rented a bigger shredder. So the intention with this shredder is to be able to use it as a backup, but also for other initiatives that we're looking to do at the landfill, including the shredding of construction and demolition waste in order to improve our our airspace utilization by further improving our compaction. So, which will also include mattresses as well. We are going to be starting a trial, and this has been supported by concrete evidence from the RDN and also the CRD in pre-shredding their waste before it goes into the landfill. So with the shredder purchase, there's just a lot more value. And with the screener, it is something that we can readily rent. So it's not that we're skirting our obligation in the screening of the contamination. So we're still meeting our Class A requirements under OMAR. But we felt that the money could be better used to support our other initiatives, which is the preservation of airspace.
That makes good sense. So basically we can just add the screener to operations if we're renting it, and then, yeah. And having a piece of equipment that's serves a purpose in more than one location also makes good sense to me. The other question I had was, last year we got a table breakdown in the report of our solid waste tipping fees and our organics, and I did mention it in the last meeting, and maybe there was a slide, but maybe not as a table. But just wondering if we could see a breakdown, because we separate out all the expenses for running organics, but then the tipping fees are always lumped in with the landfill, and it would be useful to have a better sense of that.
Yeah, but sorry, I think that must have just been an oversight on our part. Sorry. We can definitely bring that in when we do our fourth quarter variance analysis. We can include that in that report.
And Kelly, maybe I missed it, but there is a couple of slides in this deck that do show projected tipping fee revenues.
They do, but they don't show it against the organics expenses.
That's the distinction you're looking for, Director? Is that comparison, or is it the tipping fee revenues for organics?
Well, also, we don't have a copy of so I guess I have two comments, is that it would be useful to see the slides in advance because they don't necessarily match up with the tables in the staff report. So it is a little bit difficult to follow along. But then also if there is detailed information in the slides, we can't go back and look at it, and it's hard to do analysis while we're listening to a report. Thanks.
Thanks, Director McCollum. And next I'll go to Director Senate.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I appreciate how hard it is for staff to do things when we don't have specific policies that say we want to have this percentage, and we've been discussing it as a board. I remember we did a workshop and I had the impression that we really did want to move into more of a user pay methodology and didn't set a firm 70-30 or as such. And I'll have a subsequent in terms of reviewing the policy as we do in the city of Camberger. But I can say when I'm just doing the math and I'm looking at page 34 or 37, Appendix C, and it's showing the 2024 requisitions to the 2025 proposed requisitions, and it's a 20% increase to our taxpayers. That's what it works out to when we apply it to the average home. So that's completely untenable in terms of a policy range for tax increases that I can see. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The city of Camp River maxes out at 3.5, and this year we're at 2.89. And I think the SRD outside of the gardens, which is a big expense item for the services within the SRD, is also impacting Camp River at 2.9, I think. So everyone's been able to keep their budgets relatively stable through different processes. And it isn't all just cost control. There's things like how we invest our reserves and things like that, and how we manage the reserve buildups and things like that. So it's complex, many pieces working, but our policies are working really well because they're clear to staff and it gives them really good guidelines, and we don't change our strategic objectives, and we keep things on track. So I do think, my subsequent is going to be to give better guidance to staff, and we do the hard work as a board to come up with better policies to guide them and get to where we want to go, because I cannot see this being tenable to tell our staff to be at 3.5 max and then come in here and say it's a 20% increase is okay. That is really hard on our staff. So that's my comments. I would prefer if we went back to more of a user pay model. I was able to find the 2011 plan, and we were all user pay back then, and discuss how it is that we moved into such a large requisition model, particularly with such large increases. And if we've got significant challenges, we better get our taxpayers up to date on where the problems are. Thanks.
Director Sinnott, and next go to Director Chapman.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, no, right.
Okay, I'll use my outside voice. I agree with Director Grieve, and that is we have people whose business depends on what our tipping fees are. And I would like to see us develop a user fee schedule at least 3 years in advance, so that we can announce what those fees are 3 years in advance. And if we do our financial planning adequately, we'll be fairly accurate in doing that. Along with that, when we get into our asset management plan, in there will be an asset replacement schedule, at least it should be. And there it will reveal how far out of whack we are. I'm surprised we don't have a fixed asset management policy now. I was quite surprised. So we have a lot of work to do in our fixed assets and the management of it and the replacement of it. And we'll probably see we'll need a significant increase in the user fees just for the replacement of the assets. Now, when I say asset replacement schedule, that's a schedule that looks out forward like 50 to 60 years in the future of what has to be replaced, what year, what we anticipate the cost factor increase is going to be, and we just count it back. So we will know if we have money in our reserves that are going to earn interest and be available for replacement. So that is going to be revealing. The other point I want to make is on Appendix C. And I think this board asked for the requisition to stay at 5 million. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong. It's not wrong. That's not right. Okay, so we're going to go to 6 million. Okay,
Just quickly,
well, that's what I thought. I mean, 5 million is 5.5, but on Schedule C, tax implications proposed 2025 is the requisition is based on 6 million.
if I could just provide just a bit of clarity. So the proposed budget that we presented in November had a $6 million proposed requisition. The board directed us at that time to come back with the recommended budget with only a $500,000 increase from last year, which would be the $5.5 million requisition, which is what has been spoken to today and what is the recommended budget.
Great. Well, I agree with Director McCollum that it would be nice if we had these slides in advance, so we're not doing this on the fly. It puts the board at a disadvantage, and I think we could do better on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Chapman. And I would acknowledge your comment and Director McCollum's comment, and we'll talk to staff about making sure that slides are more readily accessible prior to the meeting. This is important matters, and we need to be able to read them and contemplate them before the meeting rather than in the moment. All right, Director Dahl, please go ahead.
So first thing I'd like to ask is why I couldn't find in the report the increase in a percentage format, although anytime you read about a tax increase in the media, it's reported in a percentage format. They wouldn't say your solid waste tax requisition is going up by $22. They'd say it's going up by 20% or whatever it is. But that information I couldn't find in here. It could be in here. I asked city staff and the rest of council if anyone could find it. And so far, no one has found where it says that it's a 20% tax increase, although that's what the numbers seem to work out to. They don't? I understand that going from 5 million to 5.5 million is 10%, but the cost to individual houses in Campbell River by our finance department, it's a 20% increase. Now, Councillor Sinnott's got the same information that I've gotten. Even if it's at a 10% increase. I agree with Councillor Sinnott that, we have a policy in Campbell River that it can be up to a maximum of 3.5%. And over the previous 2 years, we've been reducing and reducing and reducing our tax increases, and we're doing that consciously. It's not happening by accident. So for context, the increase for an average house in Campbell River will be $13.90. Our tax increase for the city of Campbell River is $5.75. So the requisition increase for the solid waste management is more than double the number of dollars that it is for our local taxpayers. I have a lot of feelings about these tax increases. We don't have a proper plan. So to build big reserves up for something that you don't even know what you're buying or when you're going to buy it, the first real capital asset information starts in 2031. That's 6 years from now. And it talks about user pays and having big taxing or big reserves to buy things 10 years from now to provide for the current taxpayers going forward from that point isn't user paying. Because we're paying for an asset that we may never even see. So that's not user paying. We are going into right now what sounds like it could be very likely the most difficult times that we've seen economically. Maybe not south of the Oyster River, but certainly north of the Oyster River, where every community is resource based. Yesterday they were talking about this being worse than COVID for our local areas. Worse than COVID. During COVID, resource workers could still work. With what's coming, resource workers will not be working. I know that for a fact, the resource economy is doing very, very badly right now, which for Campbell River and places like Sayward and Zabalas and Gold River, where large portions of their taxpayers are working in the resource sector, that's going to create a huge difficulty. On Monday, I cut my staff's hours by 20%. Everyone thinks that working a 4-day work week would be so beautiful, but they don't think it when they go from working 40 hours a week to 32 hours a week. And that was the lucky ones that only got cut by 1 day a week. There was others that get cut by 2 days a week. Now, this is what's going on outside of this room. And it's very real. So when we're talking about a 10 or 20% increase, while at the same time we knowingly see that people are struggling, MNP came out with a report in the last 2 weeks that says that over 50% of Canadians are within $200 of not being able to meet their expenses per month. That's fact. And at the same time that we are sitting in this room, there's people outside of this room that are having those struggles, and we're considering making it even worse for them. So I'm all for reserves when you've got a plan. But to say that you're building a reserve so that you can impact future debt without a plan is putting the carriage before the horse. Because if the interest rate is right, investing your large reserves in investments that create more interest than what borrowing the money costs is a bad plan. You're better off to keep your money in reserve and borrow money. But that's not discussed in here because there isn't a plan. And I don't know, but I doubt that there's a policy on investing reserves. But there should be. There should be a line item for capital expenses in the budget. In Campbell River, we have one. It's 1% of budget. 1% of budget, regardless of what happens every single year, goes to our capital asset replacement reserve. We don't have 10 or 20% tax increases so that we can funnel the money into a reserve fund when we don't have a plan on where we're going to spend the money. So because of these things, I would have a really hard time trying to support. I've got like 15 more things on here, but I've said about 1,000 words more than I've said in the first 2 years of being here. So I want to stop there and leave it at that.
Thanks, Director Dahl. I'm just going to ask our CEO to comment a couple of the points you made. And I appreciate your passion. I appreciate the world as we're facing some very difficult times right now. And I think it's felt throughout north and south of the oyster, and he's been part of the discussions we've been having. So anyway, message is heard and understood. Thank you. I'll pass it on to James to make a couple of comments.
Thanks. And I would echo the chair's comments that appreciate the feedback and the perspective that you and other directors are providing. And a couple of the previous directors, we didn't respond to those comments, but making some notes here. I would like Mark Rutten to come to the table. He's our General Manager of Engineering Services, and he can speak to the our understanding of the asset conditions and asset management planning that we do have in place. You'll see later on the agenda, we do have our asset management policy that we'll be presenting. That's not to say that we don't have an asset management structure in place currently. Mark can speak to a little bit more of the context around the awareness of assets and those future obligations. And then Lucy Bouchard may also want to jump in to speak to some of that financial planning and those longer term considerations. So and I would appreciate if we do take some time here to understand the different perspectives around the board, and then be able to hear from staff on some of those responses. So Mark, do you want to lead off on the asset management side, please?
Yeah, through the CAO and through the chair. So just to discuss the capital side of the budget a little bit and respond to some of the comments from the board. We do have a very good understanding of the capital requirements for this service for the next 10 years. And that's what this budget is built on. We know that cell 3 will be required. Cell 1 at the landfill is completely full. Cell 2 is constructed and now being filled. Cell 3 will be required within that 10-year period. That's a major capital requirement. And the plan also includes all of the other capital requirements, the closure of Cold River, Cassis, Zabalis as major projects, and then the ongoing capital requirements around equipment and machinery. So all of that is layered in. There's a really good understanding of all of that and what's required over the next 10 years. And that is driving the increases that are in the budget and the requests for additional revenue. In terms of funding, we're not trying to save up 100% of the funds to cover those capital costs. We're trying to save up a portion of them to be in a good position and then take on debt to fund the remaining. And Lucy can speak to the targeted ratio for reserves versus debt for those future capital projects. And then lastly, on asset management, we do have work to do on asset management. We have, these are just the major capital projects that are kind of discussing and driving the budget. There is also a lot of work for us to do on asset management. Today, later in the agenda, there's a policy for asset management. So we're starting that work. And we've already done a lot of work in terms of inventorying all of our assets, doing condition assessments, life cycle assessments, determining their end of life, layering in their replacement into the budget so that there's a good understanding of that. So it's not like we have not done anything. There's been a lot of good work done. There's still plenty more to do. Yeah, so maybe Lucy, you can speak to anything.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to the directors, I don't, on the whole basis of planning for our reserves, I don't have a whole lot more to add what Mark is saying. We have the information that we have today, and that information we have used to build out our 10-year plan. And absolutely, plans for solid waste should be much more longer term than that. And that's another element that we want to be building on to future years. However, the information that we do have today, that's what drives us to bring these things to the table for you, to point out what our reserves look like to the future. Point out that the recommended budget in front of you today still has some gaps way out there in the 10-year plan in order to meet our capital needs. So those are the things that take us to that place of the plan is telling us that we need to raise some more money along the way, and the difficult decision, especially considering what our challenges are as communities and this whole unknown now with the tariffs in front of us. It's difficult to land on how do we get there, and how soon do we raise that money, and how do we try to make sure we spread this out. This is a very essential service for our community, managing our solid waste. So those are the things we've weighed along the way. Aside of reserves, the only other thing that I wanted to mention, Director, that you point out a whole lot from a Campbell River perspective, a lot of very solid and key financial management practices. And, regardless of currently the board has a financial policy that's, I'll say, quite high level and doesn't get into those details of providing that more specific direction to staff. However, it does have those very key elements in it, and that's we understand the best practice. We understand what we need to do from a financial perspective, and we've weighed those the best that we can, considering the information that we know at this time. And that's all I have, unless you want me to comment on something else further.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna add one piece. There was some comment about a 3-year tip fee schedule, or forecasting what those tipping fee increases would look to. And I will note page 5 of 79 on the PDF, and the agenda does indicate the recommended tip fee increases over the 5-year financial plan, which would then result in the revenue that we've been speaking about. So we do forecast those increases, and that would be part of our bylaw that would be coming forward, should the board support that approach. So just another piece of the comments that I want to respond to.
Director Dalton, do you want to have a follow-up? Just hit your microphone button.
I just think that if you're gonna have building reserves, there should be a reserve policy. You should know where you're gonna be investing it in, what your expected return should be. And then those things should be considered when you're doing budget. They can't be if there is no policy. They can't be if there's no long-term plan that's structured to show us what that is. We can say high level, but reality is we're talking about a budget today that's going to fund something that could be built in 10 years, like cell 3. Well, should the taxpayers of 2025 be paying towards a cell that's going to be built in 2035, or should we be paying for the cell that we built and filled, cell number 2? Now, I'm all for reserves and using them correctly, and the help that they can do for your budget and generating, a good return on your investment. I'm sure there's several people around this table that have grandkids, and we would all want to do those kinds of things for our grandkids. So in 10 years from now, when they become taxpayers, or whenever, we've done what what was right to help them, but we need to do it with a plan. And we need to consider the economy that we're working in at the same time. And I don't see either one of those things being addressed. Now, I realize that the tariff threat is fairly recent, but we knew that when we walked in here this morning. And we know that the threat is for 2 days from now. And we know that resource workers haven't gone back to work this year, and some of them may not go back to work. Many of them may not go back to work. Provincial and federal governments are both looking at responses on how they're going to make unemployment insurance quicker to receive, how they're going to lend businesses money to shore them up so they don't go broke during whatever the transition time is of these tariffs. But it doesn't seem to me that locally we're responding, not like the provincial and federal governments are. They understand it. It's being told to them every day in the media, apparently. So that's just my feelings on the whole thing.
Just through the chair, if I just have a couple more comments that maybe just bring a greater comfort level in what we've put forward and how we actually conduct our financial planning. So regardless of that reserve policy being in place, that totally defines for us how we are to manage these reserves. We do have GFOA International that lays out best practice, previous experience that we come with to the CVRD around how reserves are built and the types of parameters that you put in place with them. So this is what I've used. So I've used my experience over the years, more than 30 years in public institutions, local government, to ensure that we're trying to find those balances, ensure that we don't overuse our debt, and also start to build our reserves to levels that are aligned with those best practices. So I guess what I wanted to say is just regardless of it being down on paper, we have scripted for us along those lines of where we know we need to get to in building out this plan that's here. Secondly, I should have mentioned when I spoke first that part of the work that we did do from a CVRD perspective, we did address and update our investment policy. So we have a quite robust investment policy that guides us. And we are, as you're saying, ensuring that the money that we are holding, that we are making it work as much as possible for our citizens so that can continue to grow, so that obviously that takes the pressure off to an extent when you need to be raising the type of dollars that we need to raise from a solid waste management and the expensive infrastructure that's here. So we have the investment policy in place. We are managing our cash as we should be and investing where we can with that. And just the third comment, we just on what day was that? On Tuesday, delivered our CVRD overall budget as well, and that whole complex issues that our communities are still challenged with, and housing and affordability and all those things very much top of mind. So I understand what you're saying, and we keep that in mind, and also at the same time trying to ensure that you have a service that can keep going here too.
Thanks, Lucy. And just one small point, that the investment policy is also the CSWM board has reviewed that investment policy and support, and it reflects then the investments that this solid waste board has management over. It's not just a CVRD policy.
Director Dahl, do you have another subsequent? Usually we won't do another one, but I can do that at this point rather than going to another speaker, because I understand this building. Just gonna make sure I get the correct microphone. And just, I guess one observation perhaps is that you were talking about the tariffs and the current situation not being reflected in the staff report. Part of that does come from the fact that our last meeting was November 20th.
Yes.
Before tariffs were ever, and that's when the board gave direction which staff are working from. So this is our opportunity to respond. But anyway, please go ahead if you had.
I 100% agree that it's new.
Sorry?
I agree. It's new, the tariff thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, we all knew that coming in here today. We didn't know it in November. I wanted to thank staff for all of the work. I didn't want it to sound like I'm all negative. It's not staff's job to make policies. It's our job to do that. So staff have done everything that they could within the parameters of what we've supplied, and I appreciate all of that. So I just didn't want you to think that I'm negative or I understand how it works. I just don't like it.
That's a very clear and honest statement. Thank you, Director Dahl. We'll go online to Director Wally, and then we'll come back to the room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to capital expenditures, for example, the landfill closure in Tassus, in the past, we had postponed that from time to time. Are we legislatively responsible and obligated to do that on a certain time frame, or do we have a little bit of ability to delay that and reduce the current requisitions?
Thanks. I think Vivian will cover that question, Director Wally. Just moving some chairs in the room here.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We, under the previous, the current solid waste management plan that was approved back in 2013, there was a commitment made to close old attenuating landfills. We have subsequently made improvements to those landfills so that we can reduce the environmental impact, again, recognizing the financial obligations and commitments that we need to make as a board in order to do those capital projects. So we have been able to delay that for a bit longer, but the intention and the communication from ministry is that we are to close that when we have the ability to be able to execute. So that's with consideration of the funds that's being allocated and presented as part of this financial plan. It's not intended to go on indefinitely. When we did do the most recent survey of the remote landfills, Tassus, Sabalas, and Gold River. So these are the closures that you're speaking of. The available airspace based on the fill plan that was previously approved by the ministry we are closing in on the amount of available airspace. So we are running out of room, and based on what we can see, we're looking at we're looking at it in that 2029, 2030 time range.
Yes, my thoughts were that after those are closed, we're going to use an alternative method for that waste. But thinking that if we employed the alternative method regardless and left those open for the short term or another year, perhaps we could spend less.
The cost of construction isn't going to get any cheaper as we recognize that we will definitely want to save up to be able to pay for the closures that we know are forthcoming. But as we have seen over the past couple of years, it's the cost of closure isn't going to be any cheaper. So we do need to take that with consideration in mind. The ministry now, there's much more heightened focus around landfills, specifically around, like as we've spoken to in previous boards, around the greenhouse gas emissions. There's just a lot more eyes on these old attenuating landfills, and the enforcements will be coming.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And we're going to sort of alternate between in the room and I guess there are no further hands out there. So we'll go to Director Grieve has already spoken, so I'm going to go to Director Tyrion as a first-time speaker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for all of the work you've done on this. I just want to be clear. On page 10, it shows we're going to be about $7.4 million in borrowing. Is that right? By the time we come around to building cell 3? Okay, about $7.4 million. So with approximately $7 million in landfill closures to pay for that this board approved, and then the upcoming cell 3 is the big one. We've got about $23 million in capital costs that we need to come up with by 2031. I hear some people in here thinking that the tax requisition is too high. Others saying that the tipping fees are too large and too fast. But at the end of the day, we've got to come up with this. Otherwise, what we are giving our grandchildren is a large debt with interest. That's the reality of this situation. Already that debt is $7.4 million. Everything we trim off the budget today adds to that debt. These costs are not going away. And in fact, these costs are going to continue to rise. We've got our solid waste management plan coming. It's going to come with a bunch of recommendations for diversion, and those recommendations will have a cost. Hopefully, over the long term, we can recoup some of that cost through diversion, but up front, there will be costs. And so if this board approves those, we're also going to have to pay for those. I understand the financial situation of a lot of people, and I feel for that. But at the same time, we cannot run the service on wishes that it was cheaper. So I'm going to be in support of this plan. I think staff have done an excellent job listening to the board's recommendations and have come back with something that's workable. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Director Therrien. And I'm seeing that Directors Chapman and Grieve spoken before, so I'll go to Director Kerr next. And
thank you, Chair. So I must admit, I don't watch Campbell River council meetings very often or ever, but I just want to say, Mayor Dahl, I really appreciated your comments today. You've made a very eloquent set of points and did it with a lot of passion, and I really appreciate how you represented your residents and community. Very, very powerful for us to consider, and I also take a step back and I think about the potential Trump tariffs and which sectors it's going to come in. Is it just all negotiating tactics? He's a very strange negotiator. We also don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. Will they actually come in place? I hope they don't. They probably will. But I also don't like making decisions based on an erratic negotiator in a different country when we have local realities that we need to address. I really like the idea of paying per usage, including the tipping fees. I think that's the way we help with diversion, and that's kind of one of our strategic goals as a board is more diversion, less waste over time. And yes, fees do help with that. I'm also supportive of long-range planning, as Director Therrien just mentioned. Zigging and zagging based on politicians and threats doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we know that long-term, our children and grandchildren, either benefit or suffer from our decisions today and every meeting. So so I'm supportive of this financial plan. I want to thank staff for the work that they've done on it, and it's sure we'd like it to be lower, but I think it's the best option we have given the uncertainties. Thank you.
thank you, Director Kerr, and I'll go next to Director Wells. Make sure you got the right mic.
Thank you, Chair. And I do notice Director Vanesh had his hand up as well, so happy to see. But I'll just continue again. Fairly supportive of this, but again, acknowledge the realities that we're in and wonder if under new business, maybe it's appropriate for us to make a motion to have staff come back and start working on a reserve policy so that it's not, because what I'm hearing is sort of two things, a reserve policy that talks about how we manage the reserve, but then there's also the conversation about how big should that reserve be. And so having that comprehensive thing, maybe under new business, that could be some direction so that, because I'm not saying that there's, I think it's pretty obvious there may be differing opinions, but to have that conversation outside of this one to a certain degree, just so that we can really focus on making sure that those long-term plannings capture the interests of the board direction. So, if it's appropriate, I'll put that under new business if that's okay.
That sounds great, Director Wells. Thank you. And we'll go to Director Vinesh online.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if staff can pull back on the slides to the graph that shows the different revenues that we're getting from the various aspects of our waste management. Right. Yeah. Okay. So I did have a question about the municipal by contract. So we're not changing the tipping fees there. Are those because those contracts are locked in?
That's correct. These are the municipal curbside contracts that are held by the City of Campbell River, the City of Courtenay, Town of Comox, Village of Cumberland for their curbside collection programs. And there are rates that are already built into the municipal budget. So if we were to address those at this time, it would be incredibly impactful for those residents. It's also recognizing that there are those municipalities are already on three-stream collection service. So it's in recognition of the effort that's being undertaken by the municipalities to increase diversion, as we're already seeing through the material that's collected at the organics facility. So when we presented this at the advisory committee where your municipal representation sit on, it was supported in that regard. And we have committed to working with them to provide timely updates or future increases, as we all have done in previous years.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's what I thought. The organics, we're not changing the tipping fees on that. We're keeping it, I believe it was at 130. Is there a reason why we can't look at increasing that slightly?
The municipal by contract rate is 110, and we are currently on a cost recovery basis, making sure that we are covering the full cost of that operation. We wanted to provide that incentive for the municipalities to continue to work with us to encourage and providing that education to communities, to their respective communities, in encouraging the diversion of organics. But that's consistent with what we've done so far. But again, we're looking to, we can do a review of that when we do our next budget cycle.
Thank you. If our tipping fees are at 155 and organics are at 130, it seems like there already is incentive for people to use organics. So maybe there's some opportunity to increase organics cost there. And then just lastly, we did speak about, the fees that we charge for, is it construction with recyclables, which is basically zero still. And it's sort of identified, I remember in previous meetings that it seems like that's kind of a lack of monitoring that is the cause of that such low revenue, and that there is potential actually to monitor that further, whereas the monitoring would offset the increase in revenues and potentially create more revenues for us. Just wanted to hear staff thoughts on that.
We were specifically to this bylaw update, we were really trying to minimize the amount of big category changes. So can you go up to okay, here we go. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, let me just.
Yeah.
In terms of the categories, the recycling, sorry, commercial with recycling it amounts to a fairly small category. And you're right, it does obviously align with the enforcement at the waste management centers. But we were just really trying to focus in, target the highest volume waste categories right now to minimize the amount of impact that we're going to have. But it is something that we're working with our bylaw officer on in order to, to be able to provide that greater enforcement on site.
Right. Thanks, Director Vinesh. And let's see, there's no one else online. I think it was Director Grieve. I knocked him out of the queue, but I'll put him back in. He was the first in line of the people who've spoken before. So we'll go there.
First and almost last. Yeah, so I'm just going to add my little rain cloud to Director Dahl's atmospheric river. Somehow we talk about construction waste. It's almost so it's intentional. I can assure you that it's not a discretionary thing on the job site. You take a 16-foot 2x6 and cut it, you end up with 3.5 feet you can't use for anything. You might even have nails in it, so you can't grind it up. So I think what needs to be spoken to here is the fact that our municipal waste haulers are locked into contracts. So are all our small business people out there. And although these aren't big multinational corporations, these are your brother, your neighbor. These are people in our communities that also employ, as I said, a lot of young people up there. So, I mean, $50 a ton extra doesn't sound like a lot, but you can't back charge that to the homeowner. So it all adds up. So in the interest of fairness, interest of giving somebody a heads up, I would propose later on that we delay the actual charge for at least 6 months, if not more, just to give the contractors a heads up on this and time to work it into their figures when they're doing estimates, because it's very real. So it doesn't sound like a big thing, but like I say, it's not discretionary waste. You cut open a bag of insulation and it gets wet. You can't use it. It's not your fault. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go next to Director Morin, first time speaker.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Some great comments. I think it really, I guess, illuminates the challenges that we have. We can opposing and differing things can both be true. So we know that people are really struggling. We know in the present. We also know that if we don't plan for 10, 20 years down the road, I appreciated Director Therrien's comments, having 7 grandkids. And I try to remember that I'm making decisions actually not so much for me, but for the generations down the road so that they're not incurring the costs, those astronomical costs. I had a question about clean fill. Do we have any companies or anybody that accepts clean fill? And I'm focusing on that because I did just go through construction, so I really appreciate Director Creeve's comments as well, and those escalating costs when you're building. I had to get rid of a bunch of clean fill, and it did cost a lot of money. And I'm thinking there must be, I thought at the time people could use that. So do we not have a company that's either accepting it or even paying for clean fill? So that people, it's all about diversion. So it's just one thing that came up.
Yeah, for the clean fill category, there are a private landfill up in Campbell River just actually right across the street from the Campbell River Waste Management Center, Northwind landfill that accepts that material. It is definitely something that we want to encourage to go elsewhere. It is used as beneficial use for our site when it does come in. There are limitations around how much, or sorry, the type of contract, or sorry, the type of customers that they take. They generally do work with just the bigger contractors, just on the, but they're not necessarily set up for smaller self-haul folks. So that material is coming to us, but in much smaller quantities. Again, we do encourage that so that we are preserving the our valued airspace for true residual waste.
Yeah, I just think it's an area to explore, for sure. I mean, it's fairly, it's one of the, you know, sort of middle, in the middle of the chart there, so.
And we also just, sorry, just one more thing. We wanted to note, there was a, I can't remember exactly what the regulation was called. It was enacted last year in March around soil movement. So there are really strict regulations around the movement of soil and the requirements for testing to ensure that there is a good record of tracking how soil is moved around the site.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. And we'll go next to, that is Director Chapman. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just I do want to address the comments made by the CAO on the user fees, the tipping rates. Yes, they're in table 2, but I would expect to see that as a schedule for the future years. So people, when they look at it, they know. So if somebody is bidding on a job, they'll have that information. Granted, yes, that could change, especially when we get our asset management plan and the asset replacement schedule worked out, that could increase. But at least if we announced it as a schedule, it would be accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Chapman. That sounds like a wide step. And I see my CEO writing that down, so I'm sure they'll be put into action. But I appreciate the observation. Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. Chair, I just wanted to circle back comments around it be considered for increase. And just looking at the chart, it appears that the operating is just for 1.5 million. Maybe staff could clarify exactly what that number is, but I just wanted to confirm then that the cost that we're charging for organics is in fact covering all the operational costs and some capital on top of that. That's part of why I was interested in knowing exactly what the tipping fees were for organics, because I think it's important that that fee does cover the cost of processing, but also we should not necessarily be using organics to fund the cost of putting other streams into the landfill space. So that is one of the reasons why I do think it's important to see how the two equate. And then it helps us understand whether or not there is a need to increase that amount or leave it as is. And another related question is, it looks as though there's $5,000 in retail sales in revenues, and I just wanted to confirm that that is selling the product that comes out of that facility.
Thank you for the question. The revenue that is coming in from organics is roughly about 1.2 million, with the expenses coming in at the projected expenses coming in at just about under $1 million here. And there is a bit of buffer placed in there to account for any just have a little bit of buffer in place. So it is on a cost recovery basis. Last year, we were able to, we projected out, sorry, just trying to pull this up as we're working. The amount of material that we sold outgoing from organics was just under 600 tons. And at the current tipping fee bylaw of $20 per yard, we made roughly about $7,200. We are working on a more comprehensive plan to do greater marketing so that we can also reflect the market rates for organics, compost, finished compost. So we're concluding that work fairly shortly, and we're going to be putting together a full marketing plan so that we can get this material out, and also looking at the various marketing strategies to target farmers, which hasn't traditionally been users of our compost. So if, yeah, tell your friends we're selling compost.
All right, thank you, Vivian. We're still on receipt, and I'm seeing at this point no further lights. We'll just dispense with receipt. Anyone opposed? And that carries. And there is a recommendation. Director Sinnott, make sure I'm getting the correct microphone for you.
Sorry, I'm not moving with the recommendation. I'll wait for the subsequent afterwards. Thanks.
Move the recommendation, Arbor.
Thank you, Director Arbor. That's being moved and seconded, and the motion is on the floor. Do we have any further comments or questions by the directors? Okay, and what's loading? Oh, Director Grieve, thank you. That's right, I didn't see your light. Go ahead.
I'd like to propose a small amendment that we delay the implementation of the increase for C&D waste for 6 months in order to give the industry time to adjust.
Okay, that's being moved and seconded. So we're on debate about the amendment at this point, and we'll go to Director. Right, go ahead.
Just for clarity, so the proposed, the recommendation would have been an April 1st start date. The 6-month delay would be from April 1st. So is that October 1st? September, October 1st? That's the intent? Thank you.
All right, and I'll pass it on to Director Tyrion, commenting on this. There we go.
I'm just curious if we know what the cost of that 6-month delay, what the loss of revenue of that 6-month delay would be.
I couldn't hear what you were saying, Director Grieve. Would staff be able to respond to that, please? The question.
Kelly, I'm not sure if that's a number you can pull together on the fly. Certainly there would be a delay to revenue coming in as that change. And I think the net result would be lower reserves at the end of the day by having that delay to the revenue coming in. But I'm not sure if we can quantify those numbers on the fly.
Kelly, would you be able to speak to that in one way or another? Let us know if it's possible to calculate that or not. Okay, sorry, could you, and thank you.
Just quickly, based on the 2 different rates, the construction waste, be just around 430,000. Is that what you got? 415.
And then I assume that would
That would be as of July 1st.
and then that number would ultimately end up as borrowing at the end of the 2031, sending borrowing up to about 7.9 million.
Based on this plan, yes. We would have to reduce the rate.
Kelly, can you face the mic and speak a little louder, please?
Based on this plan, yes, we would have to draw from the reserve, either bring down the contribution that we were going to make from the surplus, the 2024 surplus, or include it as a transfer from the future expenditure reserve.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear.
Did you have a subsequent?
No, I just wanted to be clear on what we're contemplating.
Okay, thanks very much. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote on the amendment? Not seeing anything online. Okay, so the amendment's been first and seconded. It would be to delay the date until October 1st. All those in favor? All right, so I see Grieve, Kerr, sorry, that Grant. I think did we maybe do a roll call just to make sure we've got this clear because they're also hands online. Yes, so staff are going to put the amendment on the screen and then we'll do a roll call vote. All right, so we seem to be sharing it online, but not in the room, but I think everyone is from, oh, and there we go. Perfect. All right, so I'll now proceed with the roll call vote. So first would be Director Arbor.
In favor.
Okay. Are you ready? Yeah. Director Baker? Okay, thank you. Director Chapman? Director Deck? You're muted, Director Deck.
In favor.
All right, and Director Dahl? In favor, okay. Director Davis? Okay. Director Grant?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Nickel?
In favor.
Director Wells?
In favor.
Director Kerr? Oh, sorry, I should say Director Jonathan Kerr. My apologies. Yes, yeah. Okay. Director Kerr online? Perhaps you're muted. Director Kerr? Bueller? Okay. Director Tyrion? Director Lanyon?
In favor for Lanyon. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Mawhinney? Director McCollum? Director Morin? Director Rice?
In favor.
Director Sinnott? Director Wally?
Opposed.
Director Vinesh?
Favor.
Is that in favor?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'm opposed. So we'll just get a tally. $59 in favor, 22 opposed, so the amendment is carried. And now we'll return to the recommendation with that amendment. Is there any commentary on the, before we go to a vote? Well, let's see. But thanks for the suggestion over there. All right, so we'll see if we need to go to a roll call. All those in favor of the recommendation? Maybe we'll need to do a roll call again. It's always worth taking a test, but there we go. All right, so we'll give Lisa a second to get herself ready. All right, so we'll do this again. Director Arbor?
En faveur.
Okay, keeping it interesting. Director Baker? Opposed? And there's probably no need to turn on your microphones, but each time, Director Chapman? Okay. Director Dahl? Director Davis? I'll slow down a second, yeah. Director Deck?
In favor.
Thank you. Okay, and Director Davis, you were in favor? Okay, thank you. Director Grant? Director Grieve? Director Nickel? Director Wells? Director Jonathan Kerr? Sorry, Wells, okay, thank you. Director Kerr, Jonathan? I don't know if Director Kerr online is back. Okay, Director Tyrion? Director Lanyon?
In favor for Lanyon, thank you.
Thank you. Director Mawhinney? Director McCollum? Director Moran? Director Rice?
In favor.
Director Sinnott? Director Wally?
Opposed.
Director Vinesh?
In favor.
And I am also in favor, and we'll just take a second to tally that. And the motion is carried 58 to 18. And I think at this point, maybe we'll take just a 5-minute comfort break, and we'll come back after that. Thanks, everyone. All right, folks, I think we are going to, if you can find your seats, we're going to resume. Folks online, and going back to the regular order of the agenda, the next item is the First Nation Liaison Service Agreement, and I'll pass that over to staff to introduce. Yes. Yeah, so, and this is for receipt, if I can get a motion. Okay, and did you have a point of order, Director Senate, or?
Yes, I did, because I mentioned I wanted to do a subsequent
Oh, I'm
after.
sorry.
Third time I mentioned it.
Yes, you did mention that before the meeting. Sorry about that. Please go ahead before we get to the item 2 then.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my motion is a reflection of our discussion today, which is that the board, with staff's assistance, create a financial stability and resiliency policy, which is a framework for financial planning to deliver stable and predictable tax increase policy that staff can rely on, and that so can the taxpayers. So it's meant to provide some guidance both for planning and, instead of the high level that we heard today, in a more detailed way. And then of course we can always change things if we run into problems, but at least we're giving predictability. So the actual motion would be that the board directs staff to create a report and work with the board to create a financial stability and resiliency policy as a framework for financial planning to balance fiscal responsibility with service delivery.
Second.
And I think Lisa may want a moment to just get the text of that. Did you have the as text you could? Sorry.
It's just an excerpt from the wording I gave you. So just the beginning would be different. The board develop a financial stability and resiliency policy.
I think ideally it would be good to have it on the screen if that's possible. So we could just wait a second for that. Thanks very much, Lisa.
You want some more water?
All right, so that should be visible online as well. So that's the resolution. It's being first and seconded. I have a couple of speakers lined up here, and first one would be Director Wells. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to clarify, I'd mentioned about coming back with one really around a reserve policy. I'm wondering if that would still be necessary under new business, or if this would capture that. So back to the mover of this motion.
Thank you. The intention is to be broad. It's to capture what the discussion was today, because we had considerations of the tipping policy being too unpredictable. So it's to, the driving point is to be as broad as possible. So if that seems too constrained, yeah, that with service delivery, I think helps that. Taking off the last part, just limiting it to tax increases is too limited.
That's fine. I'll come back, and again, I could do it right away rather than wait for new business if that's better. I don't know if staff have a preference.
I think we'll perhaps keep all the resolutions flowing, so keep that on deck then. And we had Director Morin next.
Great, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just for clarity, I guess I'm wondering, this resolution would commit to actually developing this policy. I'm wondering if it would be more appropriate to say explore the feasibility of, just because even though this is fairly broad, I think it does kind of lock us into sort of this policy that would say, you know, this is the increase, and we don't veer from that. So I don't know if Director Sinnott has any comments on that, but I would be more comfortable with exploring the feasibility of, so sort of providing the options around what that could look like. Anyway, thanks.
Yes, thank you. We do operate with that type of policy at the city, and we did exceed it when we had all the inflationary impacts of COVID. So it's up to us at the end of the day. It's just a mere policy. So I don't think it locks you in, but it gives staff a better guidance of the priorities. One example would be we had a brief discussion on other revenue sources. So if we're fairly consistent as a board that we say no more than 7% is the increase, then staff may be more motivated for improving revenue sources, because that will be where they get their extra funding from. It's also a carrot and a limit, a governor in a sense.
Great, thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. So, Director Morin, did you have a follow-up, or is that good? Okay, great. All right, I'll go to Director McCollum.
Yeah, I think my question is more for staff on this. You know, I'm not familiar with the this terminology, and I mean, I think I could perhaps interpret this slightly differently than someone else, especially perhaps Director Sinnott, because there's been direct experience in developing a policy by this name in a certain way at the city of Campbell River, especially when it had the additional points of clarity that is not maybe how I would envision a policy that's called this. But so my question for staff is, there has been a fair amount of discussion today around reserve policy, and with the wording of the resolution as it's been presented, would that reserve policy be able to come out of a resolution like this, or would it require additional wording or an additional resolution, or could that work happen under something called financial stability and resilience? Because I would think that a reserve policy is part of financial resilience, and you know, it's all in how words are interpreted.
I think based on this resolution, if it's approved, and the discussion that we have heard and the interest from around the board, which aren't always voted on, but we certainly bring that into the conversation to understand the important elements at play. I think that a financial stability and resilience policy, if that's the wording, does have opportunity for many different elements within financial planning. Lucy has mentioned in the past about her own interests in having a financial fiscal responsibility framework, framework, which would have, I think, a lot of parallels to this kind of an approach. What staff would do is to come to the board with some policy language, some elements. It would be based on best practice, as Lucy mentioned, the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. So some of the best practices in the industry, as well as what other communities are doing. I know Campbell River has mentioned the policy from their perspective. So I think we would be incorporating a lot of those different elements. And then it would be for the board to determine the specific direction if there are specifics needed within the policy itself. So I think there's options. So long-winded way of saying, yeah, there's elements. There's a ability to incorporate some broad elements, and then there will be options for the board to consider how that policy is finally framed.
Okay, great. In that case, I'm in support.
And yeah, Lucy, I'm sure you could probably add some aspects. Please.
Just a couple of things, and just focusing in on maybe a couple of pieces of the wording in there. And part of it is in recognition that each local government oftentimes has their own method of rolling up what makes up fiscal sustainability. And so what I just wanted to say is just recognition that it is more about a combination of policies, and it's early days, but this is what I would suggest to this board, is that it's about a fiscal sustainability framework, and included inside of that framework is multiple pieces. Currently, for example, we've moved forward and we have a similar initiative overall for our CVRD board as well. And we've begun that journey with updating our investment policy. And this board has adopted that investment policy. That is one policy under fiscal sustainability. What I'd like to do coming forward with this board is provide the opportunity to choose what do you want and how that is laid out. Will in the end, will it for sure address things like reserves and debt and user fees? Absolutely. It's just a matter of in what combination. And as I'm saying at this point, I would recommend that we deal with each one of them. Each one of them is complex. This is a complex organization that each one of them comes forward and you're able to consider to what levels and do you want your debt limits to be and things like that. So you have the way that the resolution is scripted right now, what I would say to the board is that overall in those limits and how you want this to be sustainable increases and something that the community can say, oh, we know that we're not going to have any more than these types of increases year after year, that would be something that would come to at the end. So once you've gotten through and updated your solid waste management plan and we have a better idea of where you need to go to the future, a better idea of extrapolating forward what kind of revenue that you need and then translating that in how we actually collect that revenue. And I think at that point in time, you'd be absolutely fully informed to be able to say, now let's just make sure that we don't increase our revenue. And that is a principle that I feel very strongly about, is to only do gradual increases in taxation and other forms of revenue as you go. That's very good planning in my mind. So once you have all those other factors, that you're able to come back and start and actually layer these kind of parameters in whether that's going to be in your budget policy or inside of your funding model policy. So I suppose just in summary, and what's on in the resolution right now is the recognition that I would not foresee one policy for this board. I would see multiple policies, and it's absolutely about a whole framework. So that's just the clarity I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you. Just looking to see if there are anyone else wanting to ask any questions or make any comments. Seeing none, the resolution is being first and seconded, and let's see if we can do a vote without having to do a roll call this time. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. And I see, and online, is there anyone opposed? Speak up if you're opposed. Mark, is that you saying you're opposed? No. Okay, not saying no. So yes. Okay, great. So that passes. Thank you, Director Sinnott, for that addition. And my apologies, I misheard you. I thought you wanted to do it under new business. So that was the small glitch there, but appreciate that contribution to the board. Okay, and now we return to our regular scheduled meeting. Director Wells, I thought that the reserve policy had been covered under that, but please go ahead.
Okay, just to confirm, because I thought Director Sinnott said that it would be separate, but if we're good, I'm happy to dispense of it if staff think it's covered.
That's what I understood from what the CAO said, but perhaps you can confirm.
Yeah, the framework that Lucy spoke to and the research that we would bring back will include reserve contributions as part of that overall consideration. So
okay,
I think we think it's covered, but if the board wants to pass a subsequent to that effect, certainly that's the board's.
Yeah, no, I think if it, I mean, what I was hearing is it just that there be really consideration of a percentage, but if it's coming back, that can be articulated at that point as well. So that's excellent. Thanks.
Okay, Director Sinnott.
No, it's exactly as our finance person has sort of said. It's going to be a number of sub policies put together, which allow us to review things. That's my intention.
I don't have.
It sounds like we don't need to go belt and suspenders here. I think our pants are going to stay up. On to the next item, First Nation Liaison Service Agreement. This motion for a seat, please. Thank you, and I'll pass it over to our CAO.
Thank you, Chair. Vivian Shaw, our Senior Manager of CSWM Services, will be introducing this report for the board. Vivian, over to you.
Thank you, James. Through the CAO and the Chair to the board. This report here outlines the to seek approval for entering into a 2-year agreement with the Strathcona Regional District to continue our shared First Nations liaison position with an option to extend for another 2 years. This position here has been ongoing since 2021 on a trial basis, and it was previously filled by Tina and more recently Ashley Mildred, whom a lot of you already know, both of whom have been instrumental in building those relationships with our First Nation partners in the SRD, within the SRD. The liaison role has been really critical in advancing our solid waste management plan initiatives and other key initiatives as well, and really ensuring that meaningful engagement and dialogue, as well as collaboration with our Indigenous partners. There's also a cost-effective way to access that specialized expertise and coordinating out that outreach, reducing the duplication of efforts for the nations. From a financial standpoint, it's $25,000 that we allocate per year, and it's built within the financial plan. From a planning standpoint for the upcoming projects, this is a really much needed resource from an engagement that's required for the new waste facilities, particularly for Gold River, Tassus, and Sabalis. In addition, obviously, to the solid waste management planning process. This is supported by the SRD staff, and it was reiterated through the advisory committee meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. So the recommendation that's before you is for approval for the 2-year agreement with the option to extend based on SRD's capacity. And if approved, the corporate officer will execute the agreement and will continue supporting those engagements, referrals, and working with our Indigenous partners across the service area. That wraps it up for me. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Vivian. Just looking around to see if there are any questions or comments on that. Seeing none, we'll dispense with receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that carries. And the recommendation? Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Any commentary on the recommendation? Any questions? Anyone opposed to the recommendation? Seeing none, that carries. And we'll move on to item 3, the 2025 ABICC resolution, sustainable funding for landfill gas regulation compliance. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it to our CEO.
Thanks very much. And Vivian, again, will be introducing this report and then available for questions. Vivian.
Again, thank you. This report here is to provide an update on the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Committee on Solid Waste and Circular Economy. It's a mouthful, which is vice chaired by our from Director McCollum here. This particular report here is specific to the resolution advocating for sustainable funding to offset the financial impacts of the new landfill gas regulation. For context, the federal regulation mandates that there's a 50% reduction of methane emission reductions by 2030. So this will heavily impact the Comox Valley and the Campbell River waste management facilities, requiring that enhanced monitoring, the requirement for leak detection, and the potential upgrades to gas collection systems. We, as noted in numerous reports, we've heavily invested in our waste management centers to the tune of $42 million, and in our upgrading our infrastructure to meet the ever-evolving, to be in compliance of ever-evolving regulations. And this is done through increased taxation and also tipping fees. This is, to meet these compliance is causing a continual strain on local governments. So this resolution here is seeking predictable provincial funding to help local governments meet the regulatory requirements. And with the board's endorsement, this will go to ABICC for consideration at their 2025 AGM. And if supported, then it'll advance to the 2025 UBCM convention. Along with this, there is 5 other resolutions included in the appendix with CSWM context. The committee considered several other resolutions related to waste management, and amongst these are the waste hauler licensing, provincial disaster debris plan, solid waste management approvals, circular economy strategy, and conserving landfill capacity across BC, all of which have some application to our service. The regional district of Nanaimo has already endorsed these resolutions, so they will be advancing to the AVICC floor. It's been included in the appendix for your information, and again, also to provide that CSWM context for your consideration if you are voting at the convention floor. Yeah, that wraps up for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Vivian. And go to the directors. We'll go to Director Grieve first.
Yeah, just curious. So this is an executive resolution coming from the AVICC themselves, from their executive, right? Because who is actually sponsoring it? Who's the member municipality that's sponsoring it?
I think it's the CVRD, or sorry, the CSWM.
But we're not a member community. So it would have to be.
Can staff clarify that? Or
Yeah.
Director McCollum?
I mean,
I think I could offer that the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board, it can submit this resolution to the AVICC. And if AVICC really questions that, it would be because of the CVRD as a corporate structure, but it's coming from the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board.
so through the CVRD, because we're not a government organization.
Well, you are.
Yes, but
no, you are.
We're not recognized by AVICC. I'm just saying, so it'll have to go through either municipality or a regional district board.
This board today could adopt this motion and submit this to the AVICC. And it would not have to come back to the CVRD board.
That was my understanding. So, okay, should we check with our corporate officer? Because that's certainly, okay, same mine as our CAO. So that was certainly my perspective. So I think we'll have to accept that as likely being the case.
I know you have.
We are members. This is a Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting that has expanded to include all of the Strathcona members. And we are the corporation that would be submitting, so.
All right, Director Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, is this an opportunity for us to get our chair, along with our Director McCollum, who's part of the author of this, and get other regional districts and go down and visit Victoria and maybe thump on a desk before it gets to AVICC, so it's gives them time to think and realize that they need to put some money to their policies that they're putting forward?
I'm not averse to that at all, and but I'll turn it over to Director McCollum as you are addressing her as well.
Thanks, Chair. And first of all, I'd really like to thank staff for supporting this initiative. It's a great report. I think it's really helpful for us to see the other resolutions that go along with this in the context of how it relates to our service. Just for a little bit of background for those who aren't aware of the committee, it is made up of a representative from the other solid waste services on the island, either one or two. And there was a combined meeting with staff in the fall, I think October, where the committee came together and identified common challenges and advocacy points that we wanted to highlight as a group. And there was a discussion on the best ways to go about that. So these resolutions are some of those advocacy points. There are these plus other aspects of managing solid waste that we would also like to address with the minister. And myself and the chair have submitted a letter once cabinet was announced. It went mid-December. We haven't heard back, so we were going to resubmit it again, but we are working to try to have some direct engagement. There is commitments that ministry has made around advancing policy work that has already been supported, but it hasn't really moved along at the pace that was expected. So rather than submitting a resolution asking for work to be done that's already been committed to, there's maybe a better approach of just highlighting that previous commitment and asking that it be part of the work plan going forward. So just wanted to provide that context, and happy to provide any other answers to questions. Thanks.
Director Chapman, you had a follow-up? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I did. I was just thinking that if you did have a delegation of all those areas going down to Victoria, if you needed someone eloquent, we would volunteer Mayor Dahl to accompany you.
Well, thank you. I'm sure he appreciates being voluntold. And Director McCollum, just perhaps for clarity, when you were saying, talking about the chair, you were talking about the chair of the committee that you're on rather than me. Okay. Okay, perfect. Just for clarity there. But perhaps we can talk afterwards about the possibility of seeking a meeting in Victoria. But okay, so the recommendation is on the floor. Are there any further comments on that? Anyone online? Oh, sorry. Actually, that's true. We're on receipt, so we'll dispense with receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none. The recommendation, if someone cares to move it, moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any further comment on that? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Next item, landfill gas beneficial end use project update, and this is for receipt. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thanks very much. I'll pass it to James.
Thank you very much. And Vivian Shaw, again, will be introducing the staff report and available for any questions that might come up. Vivian.
Thank you. So on November 23rd of last year, CSW and Fortis finally signed the long-awaited agreement. This marks the beginning of the 12-month window to satisfy the conditions precedent. This is an important aspect of the work that is centered around the engineering and the financial evaluation, and which will ultimately require the BC Utilities Commission's approval before construction can proceed. The press release was issued December 18th of last year, announcing this signing of the landfill gas purchase agreement with Fortis to upgrade the landfill gas. So this is a big milestone, and we recently had our kickoff about 2 weeks ago with the project team, and the scope of work has been issued to 3 different vendors who will be supporting the Class 3 study, specifically around the biogas upgrading, the balance of the plant design, construction management, and the contracts will be are anticipated based on our last update will be awarded by early February. And there will be field investigations that are kicking off next week, specifically around the survey of the property. The future plans that's laid out within the board report will include the targeted timelines between now and then, and verifying that the upgrader and the pipeline cost estimates. This is all critical aspects to ensure that we're meeting that threshold that's been set out by BCUC. So once the cost estimate has been completed, Fortis will be submitting an application to BCUC for the approval and the acceptance of that final conditions precedent removal from the agreement. And yeah, so this is fulfilling the commitment for regular updates to the board. We'll continue to provide updates as those key milestones are crossed, and keeping you up to date. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Vivian. Appreciate that. This is just for receipt, but any discussion on that? And I see Director Turian.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I talked to our planning department and they haven't heard anything about this. So I'm imagining in Cumberland that if it's being built in Cumberland, there will be necessary permits from our planning department. So it's very small. It doesn't move quickly. So if you want to avoid delays, I suggest getting that in front of them sooner. And I'm just curious, this will be built on CVRD land, and we do not collect taxes on the landfill because of it's a municipal operation. This is going to be a for-profit asset on that land. Is it going to be a taxable asset?
That I am not able to answer, but we can get back to you.
Okay,
on
yeah.
that.
I'm just wondering how this is going to be treated and yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks, Director Tyrion. We'll certainly, we've made notes on that question and we'll
Okay.
be able to get back to you.
Yeah, if you
back to the
could,
board on that.
even if you just direct it back to our staff.
Okay.
And then they can report back to us, that's fine.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out, Director Tyrion. I'll go to Director Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. With my previous experience, if we give a license of occupation of long-term, it'll be assessed by the Assessment Authority and it'll be a taxable entity.
Thank you. Nothing like having a former CAO on your board. Thank you very much to provide color commentary where more is required. Thank you. So anyway, that item was just for receipt. I don't see any further questions or comments. Anyone opposed to receipt? And that's received. Next is the asset management policy, again for receipt. Thank you very much. All right, and I'll pass this over to our CAO.
Thanks very much. And our Manager of Asset Management, Tina, will be introducing this asset management policy to the board. As is Comox Strathcona Waste Management practice, this asset management policy was presented to the Comox Valley Regional District Board on Tuesday and referred to this board meeting here for presentation and consideration. And then any feedback and updates would be brought back through to the CVRD board. Tina, over to you.
So the asset management policy is being presented to you today. The actual policy itself is embedded in the Appendix A appended to the report. As our CEO noted, this was previously presented to the CVRD board on Tuesday and is now being referred to the CSW board for consideration and support. Tina will go into the details around the policy. It really establishes the 7 principles for applying recognized asset management practices to our service delivery. Really emphasizing that transparency in decision-making based on service levels, life cycle costs and risks, our organizational commitment to sustainability and the use of appropriate information and resources, continuous improvement, and stakeholder engagement. So with that, I'll introduce you to Tina. She's our Manager of Asset Management to present this presentation.
Thank you, Vivian. Through the CEO to the chair. So I'll start with a little background. Section 7 of the Community Charter and the Section 185 of the Local Government Act outlines the municipality's responsibility to store the public assets within its community. The Comox Strathcona Waste Management is responsible for a web of assets, including land, building, equipment, machine, local solid waste infrastructure, and natural assets. Per 2023 financial statements, total tangible capital assets of a solid waste management service valued at 57 million. As these assets are aging, efficient asset management is crucial to ensure sustainable service delivery. There has been growing recognition of the importance of asset management over the past decade. Both provincial and federal governments have introduced incentives and programs to improve government asset management. Directors already kind of discussed some concerns regarding during the budget section. So recently, UBCM highlights that few local governments have advanced the asset management maturity, promoting increased regulations and oversight. And be reduced through a strong asset management program, which not only supports sustainable service delivery, but also protects local governments from costly legal claims. While the Local Government Act, Section 744, shields local governments from certain infrastructure-related claims, negligence claims are not covered. Legal experts suggested that adopting policy for inspecting, maintaining, and repairing infrastructure can help minimize those risks. The policy will also get the solid waste management plan renewal process currently underway. And while we are imagining all of us understanding why we need to invest in the asset management as we relaunch our program, it is important to ensure we are all on the same page. Next, we're going to play a video developed by Federation Canadian Municipality.
Hi, I'm Lisa, the mayor of my town. The role of my council is to ensure that residents are provided with services that are essential to our quality of life, like clean drinking water and sanitation, transportation, parks and recreation services. Our community's infrastructure assets are critical to deliver these services. Today, like in many Canadian communities, 1/3 of my town's assets are in poor condition, in part because most of our assets were built in the 50s and 60s and are reaching the end of their useful life. At the same time, our community has grown, and so has the demand for new and improved services. We've also had to spend money to upgrade our assets to comply with new environmental and safety standards. We made investment decisions based on our ability to finance the upfront development costs. However, the bigger ongoing costs to operate, maintain, and eventually replace these assets were not fully built into the analysis. Plus, our assets are vulnerable. Climate change has resulted in impacts from more severe storms, flooding, and other unexpected events. Our assets were not designed with these impacts in mind. For example, one of our roads was washed out during last spring's flood, and we had to reprioritize and redirect money in response. Now we're caught in a cycle where new infrastructure is needed to service growth that has been sprawling beyond the core. Residents count on us to deliver exceptional services. We need to catch up on overdue maintenance of existing assets and to finance the replacements of our old ones. We strive to keep taxes and fees low. However, the revenue we collect to manage all this isn't keeping pace with it all. So my council has been faced with some tough decisions. Do we adjust tax rates? Do we delay maintenance and repairs even longer and risk the consequences? How much should we place annually in a reserve fund? Do we reduce the level of services? Do we delay new projects? So what are we doing? We're engaging in asset management planning to be more strategic about how we manage our assets and spending. We're reviewing our assets across all departments in a holistic and integrated way. We're evaluating the full life cycle costs of different capital assets and land use decisions to ensure we're choosing the best long-term option for the community. To become more resilient to a changing climate, we're developing a climate adaptation plan and starting to identify how we can become less dependent on fossil fuels. We now recognize the value of the services our natural assets provide, like managing stormwater and improving water quality. We're also speaking to residents about the cost of service delivery and their needs and priorities. All this work is helping us to coordinate our infrastructure work and set priorities. Now we have an ongoing process in place that is proactive and allows us now to make better informed and strategic decisions. We're now much better placed to support my town's economy and our residents' quality of life sustainably. The health of our assets is central to achieving these goals. Do some of my town's challenges seem familiar to you?
Thank you. So this video is a great way to communicate why asset management is important. It's also a great example of current challenges being facing right now and how that ties to the principles we drafted in the board policy before you today. So the draft of the policy has been developed through consideration of relevant research, including consultation with leading regional districts and municipalities. Principles included are in alignment with SO 55000 and established the best practice from Asset Management BC and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. 7 principles have been established for integration into service delivery and asset management practice. The first principle is balanced decision-making. We prioritizing service delivery decision based on trade-offs between levels of service, lifecycle cost, and risk. The full lifecycle cost of any new assets is determined and used to understand cumulative impacts to operations. In addition, we have a risk framework that considering both likelihood and consequence to ensure that all decisions are based on a thorough understanding of potential outcomes. Second principle is a commitment to sustainable service delivery. Have a system-wide approach to asset management using formal, consistent, and repeatable method across all services. And the third principle is having appropriate information and tools available. This principle underscores the need for accurate and completed data. To support this, we need to ensure that we have the right tools in place to help us to collect, manage, and work with data. The number 4 principle is sufficient financial resources are in place to enable sustainable service delivery and continuous improvement. The number 5 principle, sufficient human resource. This principle recognizing that appropriate human resource level is needed to deliver the program. The number 6 is stakeholders are properly engaged. Levels of service and trade-offs between costs, service are informed by and understood by relevant stakeholders. Number 7 allows for continuous improvement of a service, sustainable service delivery and merits, tracks and communicates progress. For example, align with the targeted and recommended recommendations in the corporate energy and emission plan, consider greenhouse gas emission, climate change, natural assets in capital planning decisions. Now I'm going to pass to Wei Wen to talk about the key accomplishment.
Thank you, Tina. The CSW we've completed our initial asset management plan back in 2021. That is the AECOM report that was previously presented, I guess, to the prior board. And we have budgeted for those assets that were identified at that time as part of as part of our financial plan. And we're planning to update that this year to incorporate, to update the plan for the current conditions report, as well as to include the new assets that have been implemented since the completion of that report, which includes the organics facility, Cell 2 construction, the Campbell River closure, as well as the Campbell River flare. As noted in that video, that YouTube video, an integral part of that asset management strategy is to consider climate change, the effects of climate change. And we have started to incorporate a lot of this work as part of our emergency planning for our regional landfill, as well as the design of the leachate pond, which was constructed back in 2023. So it is very much top of mind. So there are aspects of it that we've already incorporated while it's not while the formal asset management policy hadn't already been implemented, but it is still things that we have been considering through the various construction projects. So I also wanted to highlight, we have 3 CSWM staff that have already completed the asset management planning training. So again, to further support this work, and with the solid waste management plan work that's currently underway, this will take into consideration the full costing of the service, which will ultimately determine the service level for the region. And these are the options that are before you embedded within the report. The staff is recommending that the board support the asset management policy, consistent with the conversation that's been heard around the board or this morning. I think that is the last slide. All right. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vivian. We're currently on receipt. Not seeing any hands, so we'll perhaps dispense with receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Okay, and that carries. And there's a recommendation. Moved by Grieve, second by Grant. Any commentary on the recommendation? Any questions? Or any opposed? And that carries. People are obviously hungry, ready for lunch. We've already done the financial plan, the resolution status report for receipt. Moved by Grant, seconded by Morin. Anyone opposed to receipt? Or sorry, any questions there on this resolution status report? Director Wells.
Yeah, thank you. Item 13, which is right at the end of the report, talks about the potential of an additional depot at the south of Campbell River, which really, first of all, I want to, all these updates in here are great to read. And just seeing how it says that Willow Point might not meet the threshold, but possibly Oyster River, and just wondered if, other than it being a comment in here, if there's actually a potential for a timeline or any work that the board can do to help facilitate something like that.
We are working towards that, and we can provide a better update once once we have more certainty around the Oyster River property, and we'll be able to report back to the board with a more definitive timeline.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. I would be remiss if I did not ask if there were any further updates on the Quadra Island Recycle Depot. I noticed that the language on the November resolutions report is remarkably similar to the one that we are receiving now in January. And I was just kind of hoping that there may have been an update in the interim 2 months.
The procurement for the the operational agreement, lease agreement have all been solidified. The procurement for the building is underway, and the signage to inform the Quadra residents, the signage is being printed as we speak. So we'll be able to provide that broader communication to the public with we've also updated the website with the timeline so that there could be more reference for you to be able to reference the community for updates in regards to this.
I just was just curious because it says building RFP to be reissued now, and it also said that in November. So I'm wondering if there's a timeline on when that will actually be taking place. I understand it's slated for opening in the spring of 2025, which feels like just around the corner.
Sorry, the update regarding specifically we're not going to RFP. We're under the procurement policy. We can do 3 quotes and do the award based on that. So we're just the quotes that we did have previously were quite outdated. So we're working through procurement to procure the building, and once we have that, we'll be able to provide a set timeline, a more definitive timeline for construction and opening.
All right, seeing no other questions on the resolution status report, it's being moved for receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. And then bylaws for first, second, and third reading. And of course, this is regarding the budget, but there was that amendment which Director Grieve introduced and was passed by the board. So the okay, and this is the amended version, Lisa.
I don't have an amended version, but first motion I would amend.
Okay, so be this resolution as amended by the October 1st start date for the construction tipping increase. Moved and seconded. Okay, any question? It was Director Baker. Chapman and Baker, yeah, thanks. Chapman first, Baker second. All right, any discussion on this? Anyone opposed to the adoption? Sorry, let's be up, sorry, to first and second reading, I should say, concurrently. All right. Mhm.
Now the next motion will be first reading.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've had a vote on the amendment. Sorry, anyone opposed to the amendment, which was just proposed? Seeing none, we then move on to the first reading of the bylaw as amended. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed to first reading? And where's second reading gone? Okay, right. Begin second reading. Okay, Director Below. So and second reading was that Director Chapman? Okay, so could someone? Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded for second reading. It's a procedure heavy kind of thing that we're doing right now. Okay, and Director Kerr, I think, was the seconding it. Thank you. Okay, so we got second reading first and seconded as amended. Any opposed to second reading? Yes, you're opposed to second reading, Director Chapman? Director Senate, is there anyone else in opposition? Director Dahl? Looking around the room, is there anyone else who's opposed? And is there anyone online who's opposed? Okay, Director Lanyon, we see your hand there. Thank you. Okay, and with those opposed, which should be noted, that carries. And we thank you very much. We moved twice, seconded twice, so we're looking good there. Okay, Lisa, you got those. Perfect. Thanks very much. And any opposed to third reading? And that would be Senate, Chapman, Dahl, and I'm assuming Lanyon. Okay. And that carries. All right. And I think at that point all we have left is termination, correct? Okay, thanks. And this lunch, which we've all waited a good while for. Thank you, everyone.